Hello the world, hello the internet, hello Jason Isaacs, hello to all of those poor buggers who have an exam when we get back from half term, and hello those people in the future, that is people who don't have an exam in June 2017, but we're still here. By that time this will probably be out of date because I think we're in for a big shake-up after the election, but we can worry about that later. However, having said that, some things don't change, some things do remain the same, and one of those is the starting point. The starting point is the post-war consensus, where traditional conservatism and traditional Labour essentially combined to produce a sort of managed mixed economy, predicated on the very simple observation that the government can engineer progress and therefore should engineer progress. Now, those of you who are familiar with philosophy will recognise this as the naturalistic fallacy. But we need to see it in the context of politics, and it emerges from the Second World War, where massive intervention on the social scale had massive consequences. The clearest example of which is probably rationing itself, which produced huge long-term benefits in terms of social development. But I'm being distracted. Of course, there are other things that came out of the war, and that's not really the point here. Anyway, the critical observation about this is that though we had a divergence of rationale, though what was going into the political mill was different on both the Conservatives and the Labour side, what came out was the same. We had this managed economy, and we had a commitment to social cohesion, and we can rather look at it like this. So we had on the economic side, both of them were preaching a version of Keynesian economics, that is government intervention, redistribution, and so on and so forth. And both of them were presenting social cohesion through commonality, through common values, principally here, and arguably here through common services. Both of them obviously committed to the welfare state, as that emerged very much from the post-war consensus. But again, the fundamental principle here is that the government was there to make things better, to take what existed and to turn it into something that was an improvement on that, generally by evolutionary means rather than revolutionary means. But then we have the big change, and what I've tried to do here is to break this down into three particular stages. In reality, there's only two stages, because Cameron conservatism will soon be forgotten as a mere byproduct, a rounding error, if you will, of history. His legacy will always be Brexit. So thanks, Dave. Anyway, coming back to this, economic policy, this is how you need to think about it. With Thatcherism, we have the general idea of neoliberalism, that is going for growth. The government cannot do this stuff by itself, or as Thatcher said, government can achieve nothing except through people. So what Thatcherite economic policy was all about was about unleashing individualism. Neoliberalism, enabling people to throw off the burden of government and go off and make stack loads of money. So that was Thatcherism in terms of economic policy. The social policy was, we achieved social cohesion through homogeneity. This is a very much didactic method. We're going to force everyone to be the same, both through capitalism and through law and order, religion and patriotism and those sorts of things. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to posit a sort of one-size-fits-all on social policy, whereas unleashing the individual here. Now, if you want to turn around and say, well, that's inconsistent, I wouldn't possibly argue with that. And I think to a certain extent the consequences of that are still with us now. But here we've got individualism, and here we have got homogeneity. Now, when we move on to New Labour, they said, well, okay, this is all very well and good, but some people are missing out from that. And if you're not able to participate in capitalism, then you will miss out on all the benefits. So we're going to create this social justice package which will widen the access to capitalism, and these are the principal things that they did there. The key thing here is that we've got a critical split in Labour. We're moving away from redistribution, we're moving away from Keynesian economics and into this new monetarist neoliberal world. This was a sea change. It's a monumental departure for Labour, and again the consequences of that are still echoing through modern Britain. Now, we also have a critical change in social policy, a big divergence here from Thatcherism. So here we've got Thatcherism plus. Here we say, no, that's not going to work. What we're going to do here is adopt this policy whereby if we're all different, then by definition we're all the same. In Indonesia, they call this Pancasila, unity in diversity. And it's a very similar idea to that which is operating in the United States. This is the idea of a big tent. So what we're saying here, look, just forget about everyone. There's no right way. If you accept that everyone comes at it their own way, then all is going to be well. So if everyone's different, then everyone is the same. So that's New Labour, the third way. We are widening here the access to capitalism, and here we are rejecting entirely Thatcherite social cohesion through homogeneity. So here we've got social cohesion through multiculturalism. As we move on to Cameron conservatism, he can't really do anything to reinvent the wheel. He doesn't have the well, first of all, because he came in with a coalition, he didn't have the clear mandate to do so, and also he didn't have the imagination to do so. So what we've got is a continuity here from New Labour. We've got as above plus the living wage. And then, of course, he had to deal with the monumental Foster clock that was the economic meltdown in 2008, and that obviously that restricted his hand to a certain extent. And when he came over here, well, there was no putting Labour's toothpaste back into the tube, so we've got as above, but more so, and we have the introduction of gay marriage and free schools and free school meals for primary school kids and so on and so forth. So the key thing here is, on this side, we have continuity all the way through here. Thatcher reinvented the wheel. Labour wasn't going to do that, so they made access to capitalism easier, and Cameron couldn't do that again, so he just tacked his bit on. Here we've got a discontinuity. We've got one idea here, then we've got a completely different idea here, and so profound were the consequences of that change that Cameron couldn't do anything here. So the discontinuity with economic policy is in 1979. The discontinuity with social policy is in 1997. So 79, 97, you should remember that. And yep, no reinventing the wheel. So that's economic policy and social policy. Let's have a quick look at some specific comments and coalition. As I said, the Lib Dems struggled. This is a little bit really about the Lib Dems, some good stuff there that they did. Now, post-coalition, what we saw from Cameron Conservative was a much more coherent conservative, well, Thatcherite assessment. They took on the trade unions and they went ahead with further cuts to corporation tax. This is what corporation tax looks like, by the way, in case you're curious. And you can see there how it was dramatically slashed. Or rather, it's been sort of coming, well, coalition did that, and then we kept going down as we came into proper conservatism. And this is incredibly low globally, never mind in the context of the UK. UK's political history. And of course, the Trade Union Act was 2016, sorry, fat finger syndrome. So a few things there about Cameron conservatism. And I think that when we come to May, her economic policy, well, I think this needs a slight fine tune. So let's have a look at Mayism in a lot more detail. And I think this really is what a lot of people are looking for. Before we get to that, let's just mop up foreign policy, because this is important. We're going to do this the other way. Thatcher was wary of the European Union. She supported expansion to prevent deepening, and we can see that with Single European Act and Maastricht Treaty. New Labour was massively split on Europe, as you should definitely know. And, well, Cameron, less said about that, probably the better. In terms of the USA, Thatcher was a very close but not uncritical friend. It was an interesting, nuanced relationship there, but very much, I think, in terms of Thatcher, we can say that she was much more pro-USA than she was pro-Europe. New Labour, again, kind of split. Blair was very much pro-Bush. Brown was much more wary, but the Blair-Bush axis just dominated the whole thing. Brown was concentrating on his economic and domestic fiefdom, and so foreign policy there utterly dominated by Blair. In terms of the United States here, Cameron was not the sort of chap who particularly impressed Obama. Obama thought that Cameron had hung him out to dry on Libya, and thought he was playing with fire with Brexit and so on and so forth, and certainly struggling to deal with the legacy of Blair as well there. If we look at others, Thatcher, I'd say pragmatic patriotism is a very good way to sum up her general approach to foreign policy. With Blair, we have neoliberal liberal interventionism, and With Cameron, we see a much reduced and certainly a much, again, tainted, I think, approach to liberal intervention. Critically there, remember that Parliament did not give Cameron permission to intervene in 2013. And we have a monumental failure to deal in any coherent way with the refugee crisis. Okay, enough of that. Let's have a look at Mayism. And I've got 5 minutes left, so let's push on. We're going to look at it through this particular matrix, trying to keep things simple. So we've reduced it really to just 4 central boxes. And without a shadow of a doubt, the most important of these boxes is the first one. Government can and should be a force for good. Its power should be put squarely at the service of the country's working people. Now, that is a direct quote from the manifesto. And critically, you should appreciate that that is a rejection of all things Thatcherite. Thatcher said government can achieve nothing except through people. What May is doing here is she is drawing a clear line, a clear ideological divide between herself and Thatcher, at least at a general, principled, or indeed rhetorical level. Okay, so that's very, very important. We're having a grandstanding position here. We are different from Thatcher. I am not Mrs. Thatcher. If we look at a social policy, again, we see that manifest, at least at a rhetorical level. Everything else has been kicked down the road. There's nothing about the Human Rights Act that's safe until Brexit. We've got a commitment to modest reform in prisons. That's a bit of a backtracking on Cameron. There's a commitment to reducing immigration, but nothing concrete, and there's nothing on LGP or drugs. So we don't have anything clear and distinct that we can say that, again, other than rhetoric. We reject the cult of selfish individualism. She is there, again, trying to draw a line between herself and Thatcher. Perhaps the most significant departure here is economic policy. We are seeing much more government intervention. The places you need to look are definitely energy price caps and the idea that we're going to start taxing wealth rather than income. And this social care, the idea of shifting the burden from the state and the next generation onto the pensioners who have benefited so much from the post-war boom, is a bit of a departure from, again, Thatcherism. But if you can talk about the government intervention in the terms of the price energy caps, that's important. The idea that they're going to start taxing wealth rather than income, that's important. And again, social care, we're trying to shift the burden away from next generations and onto the current elderly population who have done so well out of the existing settlement. Is that a radical rejection from neoliberalism? I don't think it's as radical as people are suggesting it is. Energy price caps on price caps on energy bills is not really neoliberalism reversed. Again, stronger on rhetoric than I think than perhaps on coherent policy. Apart from this idea of social care, shifting the burden, social care for the elderly being shifted back onto the elderly themselves. You could argue that's a cynical move because the elderly are very unlikely to vote Labour, at least they were when this policy was introduced, and that may have changed now. But anyway, there we go. Foreign policy, everything starts with Brexit. We've got a massive policy vacuum in the Middle East, the USA, and the refugee crisis. Nothing coherent there. And I think this is very much a criticism that is now being recognised of the Mayist approach here. Rather like the Democrats in the United States, their only policy at the minute is that, hey, we're not Trump. Similarly with May, I think this is all rhetoric. She's saying, hey, I'm not Corbyn. And that may become, she's neither Corbyn nor Thatcher, And I think that both of those policies, or certainly that Thatcher, the anti-Thatcher, anti-Corbyn policy, is revealing at its heart a policy vacuum that people are not impressed by. And at this stage, a few days ahead of the election, I think the Conservatives will probably still win, but I don't think they're going to get the crashing mandate that she thinks she is. Now, hey, I've been wrong before. I remember it distinctly, but I won't mention her name here. The key point is Mayism is entirely dominated by two things. First of all, Brexit, and secondly, a need to win this election so that she can have what she considers to be a mandate to move on. Ideologically, it's neither Arthur nor Martha. The critical point here is rhetorically, they are seeking to establish a clear divide between Thatcherism and Mayism, and indeed Cameronism, because that's a continuity of Thatcherism and whatever it is that she stands for. She's saying, look, I'm not anybody else. I am my own person. please vote for me. I'm out of time. Send me your questions and good luck.